Lucille Ball was standing in the middle of the most famous chocolate factory scene in television history when she heard it. Not a whisper, not a quiet comment muttered under someone's breath. A loud, deliberate insult shouted directly at her husband, Desi Arnaz, from someone sitting in the studio audience. The kind of insult that cuts through laughter and stops time. Lucy froze mid-scene. The cameras kept rolling. The crew held their positions. 300 people in the studio audience suddenly went completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop on that soundstage. And then Lucille Ball, the most powerful woman in Hollywood, did something that would either destroy her career or prove exactly why she was untouchable. She didn't look at the director. She didn't signal to security. She didn't pretend she hadn't heard it. She walked off the set, microphone still hot, camera still recording, her chocolate factory worker costume still on, and she headed straight into the audience, directly toward the man who had just called her husband, a word that nobody should ever have to hear. What happened in the next 7 minutes would become one of the most legendary moments in television history. But here's what nobody talks about. Here's the part that got buried for decades. That moment wasn't just about one insult. It was about years of pain. Years of watching the man she loved smile through hatred. Years of Desi Arnaz proving himself over and over again, only to be told he still wasn't good enough. And on November 14, 1952, at DeSolo Studios in Hollywood, California, Lucy decided she was done staying quiet. But to understand why what she did next shocked everyone in that room, you need to understand what Lucy and Desi had already survived just to get to that moment. Because the real story, it started long before that Friday night taping. If you want to see how one woman's courage changed Hollywood forever, keep watching. And hey, let us know in the comments where you're watching this from. We love hearing from you. Now let's go back to where this all really began. To understand what happened that night, you have to understand Hollywood in 1952. This wasn't the industry we know today. This was a business that believed a Cuban band leader had no place on American television. A business that told Lucille Ball again and again that casting her real-life husband would destroy her career. When Lucy pitched I Love Lucy to CBS, every executive gave her the same answer. We love you, Lucy. America loves you. Desi, no. They didn't say it was his accent, though it was. They didn't say it was his ethnicity, though that mattered too. They just said audiences wouldn't accept it, and expected her to move on. Lucy didn't. She'd built her career being told no, fired from drama school, labeled not pretty enough, told she was too old. Every time she proved them wrong. So when CBS rejected Desi, she gave them an ultimatum that changed television. No Desi, no Lucy, no show. CBS assumed she was bluffing. They offered replacements, handsome white actors with perfect American accents. Lucy turned down everyone. Finally, CBS told her to prove Desi could work on television or forget the idea entirely. Lucy and Desi took their life savings and went on the road. They created a vaudeville act and toured the country for months, performing in clubs and theaters. Desi handled everything: venues, contracts, logistics. Night after night, audiences responded. America wanted to see them together. Even after I Love Lucy became the #1 show in the country after 44 million people tuned in every week, Desi still faced constant dismissal. His intelligence was questioned. His accent mocked. Many assumed Lucy was the mind behind it all, and Desi was just the man with the conga drum. What most people didn't see was the truth. Desi Arnaz was a genius. He pioneered the 3-camera system, filmed before live audiences, created the rerun model, and built Desilu into the largest independent television studio in Hollywood. 35, he wasn't just a star. He was a mogul. But none of that mattered to those who decided he didn't belong. Lucy saw it every day. She watched Desi smile through insults, joked to make others comfortable, and worked twice as hard for half the respect. And on November 14, 1952, something inside her finally broke. What came next? No one saw it coming. November 14, 1952 started like any other Friday at DeLu Studios. Lucy and Desi arrived around 5:30 in the afternoon, 3.5 hours before the 7 o'clock p.m. taping of their latest episode, Job Switching. This was the episode that would become famous for the chocolate factory scene. The one where Lucy can't keep up with the conveyor belt and starts stuffing chocolates into her mouth and down her shirt. Comedy gold, the kind that would be replayed for generations. But the day had already gone wrong before they even left the house. That morning, a reporter from a Hollywood magazine had called asking for a comment. The question was blunt and ugly. "Mrs. Ball, do you ever feel embarrassed by your husband's accent? Some viewers say they have trouble understanding him." Lucy hung up without answering, but Desi had heard it. On the drive to the studio, he was quiet in a way Lucy recognized. Not angry, not upset, just tired, the kind of tired that comes from carrying the same weight every single day. "Don't let it bother you," Lucy said, reaching for his hand. "I don't, honey," Desi replied, smiling the smile he always wore. "Let's just do a great show tonight." By 6:45 p.m., the studio audience was filing in. 300 people buzzing with excitement, ready to see television magic happen live. The crew prepared the chocolate factory set. The band warmed up. Everything ran perfectly on schedule. As always, Desi handled the audience warm-up himself. He walked on stage around 7 p.m. conga drum tucked under his arm, smile wide and confident. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen." His accent was thick, musical, unmistakable. "We're so happy you're here tonight. But first, let me introduce you to the best band in Hollywood." The audience applauded, all except 3 men in the back row. They were laughing but not kindly. Herb, the assistant director, noticed them immediately and whispered to the stage manager to keep an eye out, but it was too close to airtime to intervene. Desi continued, even making a self-deprecating joke about his accent. "My English teacher said I'd never make it in America because nobody would understand me. I told her, that's okay. I'll marry someone who can translate." And look, it worked. The crowd laughed. Then one of the men stood up, drunk, loud, cruel. "Maybe if you learned English," he shouted, followed by a slur. "Your wife wouldn't have to carry the whole damn show." The studio went dead silent. Desi's smile didn't vanish. Froze. Anyone watching closely could see it. The face of a man who had heard this 1,000 times and learned to swallow it. He tried to laugh it off. "Well, my English must be pretty good. I married the smartest woman in America and she said yes." Polite applause followed, awkward, forced. Backstage, Lucy heard everything through the sound system. She stood in her chocolate factory costume, ready to go on in 2 minutes. Vivian Vance grabbed her arm. "Lucy, don't let security handle it." Lucy's voice was ice cold. "That man just insulted my husband in our studio on our show." As Lucy walked toward the stage, William Frawley tried to stop her. Desi wouldn't want a scene. Lucy met his eyes. "Desi's been the bigger person his whole life. I'm done pretending." She stepped onto the stage. Not as Lucy Ricardo. Not even as Lucille Ball, the comedian, but as a woman who had fought Hollywood and won, and everyone watching could feel it. Someone was about to pay. The only question was how far she was willing to go. Lucy walked onto that stage like she was walking into battle. Her footsteps echoed in the dead silence. Every person in the studio, 300 audience members, 50 crew, froze and watched her move. She didn't look at the cameras. She didn't look at the director. She looked straight at Desi, who stood at the front of the stage, still trying to smile, still trying to hold himself together. "Lucy." His voice was confused, worried. "We're about to start, sweetheart." She didn't answer. She walked to the center of the stage under the brightest lights and turned to face the audience. Her chocolate factory costume suddenly felt absurd. Fake stains, a silly hat, but her face wasn't funny at all. The silence pressed in on everyone. "I heard what you said," Lucy said calmly, her voice cold and steady. She stared at the back row. "The gentleman back there. I heard exactly what you said to my husband." The drunk man laughed nervously. "Hey lady, I paid for my ticket. I can say whatever I want." "You absolutely can," Lucy replied. "And I can stop this taping right now, which is exactly what I'm doing." Director Mark Daniels moved toward the stage. Lucy raised one hand without looking at him. Don't, Mark. We're not rolling until I'm finished. Whispers rippled through the audience. The crew knew better. This wasn't a bit. This was real and dangerous. You used a slur, Lucy continued. You mocked my husband's accent. You implied that he's riding on my success, that without me he'd be nothing. She let the words sit. So let me tell you about Desi Arnaz. She pointed toward the cameras. You see this setup? The way we film this show, Desi invented it. 3 cameras at once. Every angle, every reaction. Networks are copying it because he changed how television is made. The room went completely still. When I wanted this show, Lucy said stronger now. Every network said no, not because of me but because they didn't want Desi. They wanted a white actor, no accent, the right kind of husband. Pause. I told them all the same thing. No Desi, no Lucy, no show. So we used our own money. We toured this country, clubs, theaters. Night after night. Desi handled everything. Contracts, venues, logistics, because that's who he is, a builder. Her voice cracked, but she kept going. And when we proved them wrong, Desi negotiated ownership, not just a role. Ownership. She gestured to the floor. We own this studio. We employ 150 people. We produce the #1 show in America. 44 million people watch us every week. Now the truth was clear. This wasn't about one insult. It was about all of them. Every day, Lucy said quietly, dangerously. Men like you make comments about his accent, about where he comes from, about whether he belongs. She looked at Desi. Tears ran freely down his face. I watched the most brilliant man I've ever known smile and pretend it doesn't hurt. I won't do that anymore. She turned back to the audience. Desi Arnaz is twice the professional, twice the innovator, and twice the man anyone here will ever be. She pointed to the back row. You're leaving now. Security moved in. And the rest of you, Lucy said, you're about to watch history. Because Desi Arnaz is the reason it exists. The studio didn't applaud. Not yet. They were too stunned to breathe. And they had no idea what was coming next. Security reached the back row. The drunk man stood, trying to hold on to what little dignity he had left. You can't kick me out. Paid for my ticket. This is Lucy cut him off. She didn't raise her voice, but it carried through the studio. Your money is waiting at the box office. Leave now. The 2 men with him stood immediately. No arguing, heads down, faces burning as they headed for the aisle. But the main heckler lingered, still trying to act tough. This is censorship. Have a right to. Then it happened. One person began to clap. A woman in the 3rd row, slow, deliberate, then another, then another. Within seconds, all 300 people were on their feet, applauding, not for Lucy, though she deserved it, but for Desi. The sound was overwhelming. It echoed off the walls, swallowed everything else. The drunk man stopped talking, stopped pretending. He simply stood there as security escorted him out, while the entire audience clapped, some openly crying. Sissy stood frozen at the side of the stage, tears streaming down his face, staring at Lucy in disbelief. Not just at what she'd said, but at what she'd risked. As the hecklers disappeared through the doors, the applause grew louder. Shouts rang out. We love you, Desi. Thank you, Lucy. Lucy finally turned to him. She crossed the stage and took his hand. You didn't have to do that, Desi whispered, his voice shaking. You didn't have to, Visp. Yes, I did, Lucy said softly, squeezing his hand. Someone should have stopped it every time. I'm sorry it took me so long. Desi kissed her forehead and whispered in Spanish. To Mazid. I love you more than my life too, Lucy whispered back. The applause continued. Director Mark Daniels approached pale with worry. Lucy, we're 45 minutes behind. CBS is going to give us 5 minutes, Lucy said calmly. We'll do it in one take. The crew thought the night was over. But 5 minutes later, Lucy returned in full costume, hair perfect, makeup reset, that familiar smile back in place. Desi stepped to the microphone, still emotional, but smiling. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you from my heart. Now let's have some fun. The audience roared. They filmed the chocolate factory scene. One of the most iconic moments in television history. Lucy scrambling, stuffing chocolates everywhere. Comedy at its finest. But those who were there noticed something different. When Lucy looked at Desi during the scene, it wasn't exasperation on her face. It was pride. Desi looked back with the same expression. They weren't acting. They were simply two people who loved each other. They nailed it in one take. When cut was called, the audience stood again, applauding for 5 full minutes. Lucy and Desi bowed together, hands intertwined. And for the first time, Lucy saw it clearly in their faces. Not laughter, respect. But the real test would come after the cameras stopped rolling, because what happened backstage would decide whether that night became legend or the end of everything. Lucy and Desi walked back to their dressing room hand in hand. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. They just needed to breathe, to absorb what had happened. Vivian Vance waited outside. The moment she saw Lucy, she broke down. "Lucy, that was the bravest thing I've ever seen." William Frawley stood nearby, gruff as ever, except his eyes were red. 40 years in this business, he said quietly. Never seen anything like that. Mark Daniels hurried over, looking exhausted. "Lucy, CBS is going to call. We went nearly an hour over schedule." "Then they can call me," Lucy said calmly. "I'm not sorry. I never will be." Mark nodded. "For what it's worth, I'd have done the same." One by one, crew members approached. Camera operators, lighting techs, sound men, makeup artists. They didn't come to Lucy. They came to Desi. "We hear the comments," one cameraman admitted. "At parties, in parking lots. We never knew what to say. Tonight showed us." A young lighting assistant swallowed hard. "My dad's from Mexico. He deals with this every day. What you did tonight, it's going to mean everything to him." Desi listened, then smiled gently. "You treat me with respect. That's all I've ever asked." After the room finally emptied, Lucy and Desi sat alone. No music, no drinks, just silence. Desi spoke first. "The worst part wasn't the insult. I've heard worse. It was that I was about to let it go again." "You shouldn't have to," Lucy said softly. "That's how you survive in this business when you sound like me." "Not anymore," Lucy said, taking his hand. "Not after tonight." 3 weeks later, Job Switching aired. 44 million Americans laughed until they cried. It became television history. What they never saw was the moment before the cameras rolled when silence was finally broken. But the 300 people who were there remembered, and they talked. Lucy had stood up for Desi, and it mattered. The story didn't stay quiet. Within days, Hollywood was buzzing with versions of what happened at Desi Studios. Variety called for comment. Lucy's response was simple. "I stood up for my husband. That's what you do when you love someone." But everyone knew it was more than that. Other performers began speaking up. Rita Moreno later said, "What Lucy did opened a door. She showed us we didn't have to accept disrespect just to work." Ricardo Montalban credited her with forcing Hollywood to see Latino performers as people, not stereotypes. Within a year, 3 television shows featured Latino leads, not sidekicks, not comic relief. Leads. Every one of them traced its path back to I Love Lucy, proving it could work. By 1955, Desilu Productions was the largest independent television studio in Hollywood. Desi ran it all. His 3-camera system became the industry standard, changing television forever. Desi never spoke publicly about that night. When asked, he smiled and changed the subject. That was who he was. Lucy and Desi divorced in 1960. Fame, pressure, and personal struggles took their toll, but the respect never faded. Years later, Lucy always said the same thing. He was a genius. The world just took too long to see it. Always knew. That night, Lucy didn't just defend her husband. She defended every performer told they weren't good enough because of who they were or how they sounded. She proved love means standing up, especially when it's uncomfortable. The chocolate factory scene became legendary, but the real moment happened before the cameras rolled. When one woman decided silence was no longer an option. That's the real story of the night Lucille Ball stopped the show. Not out of anger, out of courage.